Welcome to the NdB Sunday Show with me, Steyn, and Mark Regev, the former senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You've spent some time in South Africa. How do you see the future of relations between Israel and South Africa, considering how strained those have been?
So it's clear we're going through a difficult period. I think in many ways Israel and South Africa should be good friends. There are every reason why there should be a good and healthy bilateral relationship between both our democracies. After all, Israel's a democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, and South Africa is an example of democracy, overcoming apartheid, creating a new democratic structure. There's no reason why our two countries shouldn't have a good relationship. And I would argue that not only is it in South Africa's economic interest to have a better relationship with Israel, and that's clear because Israel is, a world leader in so many areas to do with technology, whether it's agricultural technology or water management technology or health technology and so forth. And there are tangible reasons why I think South Africa would benefit from a better relationship with Israel. But I also think for moral and political reasons. South Africa says it wants to promote peace and justice in the Middle East. But you can't do that by only speaking to one side. You can't do that by ignoring one side. You can't do that by, unfortunately, embracing extremists on one side. And for all those reasons, I think a better relationship between our two democracies would be good for both Israel and South Africa, good for peace, good for the Middle East.
Over to the United States, how do you see the future of Israeli-United States relations, considering how radicalized the Democratic Party has become? It wants President Donald Trump to end the war now.
So I don't know what will happen. I do know this. The goal of preventing the Islamic Republic of Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is not just an Israeli interest. It's a global interest. And I think your viewers and listeners need to remember that it's not just Israel that is concerned about the Iranian nuclear program. It is our Arab neighbors. Across the Gulf, people fear Iranian aggression, Iranian revolutionary behavior, Iranian aggression. And Iran, with a nuclear weapon, threatens not just Israel, but the Arab states as well. And I would say to South Africans, Israelis and Arabs don't often agree, but when we do, you should pay attention. And the Iranian nuclear threat is real. According to the IAEA back in 2025, just about a year ago, they put out a report that said that Iran was weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for a bomb. Weeks. Their words, not mine. And, North Korea with nuclear weapons is a country with an extremist regime that has nuclear weapons, and all of Asia is worried. So if the Islamic Republic of Iran gets a nuclear weapon, a country that threatens not just my country, but its Arab and other neighbors, it would be a regional and a global game changer in a negative direction. And for all those reasons, there really is an interest to succeed in preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
If President Trump is forced to exit the war prematurely, what would Israel do?
So obviously, I no longer speak for the government. I'm a former ambassador. I'm a former advisor to the Prime Minister. I'm now in the private sector. I speak at a university. But I think I am saying correctly that Israel will always do what it can to protect itself, to defend its citizens, and we will not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Now, if that can be done diplomatically through an agreement, of course, we would support that. If, unfortunately, the regime isn't willing on its own devices to prevent, to stop its quest for a nuclear weapon, then Israel, I think, reserves the right to act. I'd ask you to think about that twice in the past. We have prevented nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. In 1981, Israel famously attacked Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor in Iraq. to prevent that terrible dictatorship from reaching and attaining a nuclear weapon. We did the same later in Syria to prevent the Assad dictatorship from getting a nuclear weapon. I think that was in 2007. And in both cases, you had examples of brutal regimes that had no qualms about murdering their own people, about using actually non-conventional weapons, unconventional weapons against their own people, both the Ba'athist dictatorship in Iraq and the Ba'athist dictatorship in Syria. In both countries, they used chemical weapons against their own people. Would they have qualms about using nuclear weapons against a province that was rising up against the dictatorship? I don't think so. And Iran, we saw how Iran butchered its own people early this year. I mean, the reports, we don't have exact information, but reports talk between 30 and 50,000 Iranian civilians who protested against the theocratic autocracy of the Ayatollahs who were butchered in the streets. Now, a regime that's willing to butcher its own people, do you want that sort of regime to have nuclear weapons?
What would you say are the reasons for the worldwide wave of anti-Semitism?
So anti-Semitism, unfortunately, has been called, not by me, but by others, the world's oldest hatred. And it goes back more than 1,000 years. It's a very old hatred, which my family personally experienced. My father was born in Germany in 1931, and he was very much the victim of anti-Semitic hatred, of anti-Jewish racism. My grandfather was a slave, turned into a slave laborer for the Nazis. My family was lucky to survive because most European Jews didn't survive. Most of them were murdered. And anti-Semitism has a staying power that is impressive, maybe because it has the ability to mutate. And I think the current manifestation of anti-Semitism is not focused on the individual Jew, but on the collective Jew, which is, of course, the Jewish state, Israel. And people say the most outrageous, terrible things about the Jewish state. Now, they used to say outrageous and terrible things about Jews, and now they say outrageous, terrible things about the Jewish state. But people forget. I mean, of course, Israel is a normal country, and we have problems, and we have challenges, and we can make a mistake. But the way Israel is presented often as this epitome of evil on the planet, it's not rational. It's based on that oldest hatred ever.
October 7, is Israel in a worse or a better place now?
So October 7th was horrific. Yes, we lost 1,200 people on the first day when Hamas stormed across the border and butchered our people, raped and mutilated, and of course, took about 250 people hostage, dragging both the alive and the dead back to Gaza to negotiate some sort of ceasefire in the future. Yes, horrific, terrible behavior. And if I can diverse just for a second, Hamas filmed their atrocities. Most of the evidence we have from the atrocities of October 7th, 2023, is footage that Hamas took and voluntarily put up on the website. There's on social media for people to see. And here we have to ask a question. In the past, there have been terrible people who've done terrible atrocities, but they always either denied their atrocities or they tried to cover up their atrocities. If someone accused the Stalinist regime in Russia of committing atrocities, one was accused of lying. This is not true. This is Western propaganda, it would be said. Not so with Hamas. Hamas advertised their atrocities. They advertised their brutality. They advertised their murder. Once again, voluntarily putting it all up on social media. And we have to ask ourselves, what is Hamas all about? And the truth is, they are a genocidal terrorist organization. And not just the Israelis don't like Hamas. The Arab states also don't like Hamas. And the biggest victim of Hamas in many ways, because we Israelis can defend ourselves, the biggest victim of Hamas is, of course, the Palestinian people. Because they're condemning the Palestinians to continued conflict. They're condemning the Palestinians to poverty. They're condemning the Palestinians to a fact that they don't have any sort of democracy or freedom. In fact, a real friend of the Palestinian people would be saying, Let's get rid of Hamas and build a better future for Palestinian children, better schools, better roads, better development, self-government based on democracy and not a theocratic dictatorship. But is Israel better off since October 7th? Yes, because though we were butchered and took a terrible, terrible blow on October 7th, I have no doubt that since that terrible day, we have bounced back. We have successfully defended our country. We've successfully pushed back the enemy, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the attack on Iran to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon. I think we have bounced back and we have shown that we can defend ourselves, and those who will try to murder our people, those who will try to butcher our children, will pay a price.
I've seen that many of the Hamas operatives who took part in the October 7 massacre have been eliminated. I take it Israel will not rest until the last one is dead.
Yes, if you were involved in planning or being part of the execution of the murder of my people, longstanding Israeli policy is that you will be brought to justice one way or another. And I'm happy to say, I'm pleased to say that Hamas leadership that was responsible for starting this war, for butchering 1,200 people, that leadership, in the most part, has ceased to exist. That's good for Israel, but that's also good for Palestinians who deserve, as I said a moment ago, a better leadership.
What now, as far as the Palestinian state is concerned? Is there no prospect left?
So I think if we start to work today for a Palestinian state, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because Israelis don't have the confidence that they have a partner in peace. We saw surveys done by Palestinian pollsters, respected Palestinian pollsters, that many, a majority, a clear majority, an overwhelming majority of Palestinians supported the October 7th massacre. We've also seen the failure of the non-Hamas leadership of the Palestinians, Fatah on the West Bank, their failure to condemn the October 7th massacre in an unequivocal way. And so Israelis have lost confidence that there is a peace partner, and no one in Israel is going to be talking about a Palestinian state for the foreseeable future. I would argue that if people want to see a better Middle East, a peace in the region that will be good for Israelis and Arab countries, we should focus on moving forward, and it's possible, peace between Israel and the Arab states, and then ultimately the Palestinians will join that process. Because in the past we said Israel makes peace with the Palestinians and then the Arab world will join. Well, that's clearly not going to happen. But maybe if Israel makes peace with more and more Arab countries, and that is possible, that is doable, we can move ahead very aggressively on that, then ultimately the Palestinians, which are an integral part of the Arab world, the Palestinians who see themselves as part of the Arab Muslim world, that they too will in the end, maybe in the medium term, maybe sooner, will also come to reconcile Israel. And why am I optimistic? Because Israel today has peace treaties with Egypt, with Jordan, with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, Morocco. With all these countries, we've got relationships. There are negotiations going on, as you know, with Lebanon to try to make a better relationship with Lebanon. There's talk of an agreement with Syria. There was talk before October 7th, 2023, the Saudi Crown Prince, in interviews, said Saudi Arabia was ready for peace with Israel. So once the dust settles and this conflict is over, I think the focus, the energy must be on Israel expanding the circle of peace with our Arab and Muslim neighbors. That can be done. That is doable. And I think once we move ahead on that track, where success, I think, is almost guaranteed, that will blow back on the Palestinians in a positive way. Because Palestinians won't be the odd one out. If the Arab world, if the Muslim world is increasingly open to Israel, ultimately the Palestinians will join the bandwagon of peace.
You mentioned Lebanon. To what extent has Israel dealt with Hezbollah?
So Hezbollah is greatly weakened since it was before the October 7th attack from Hamas. Their military machine, which was ferocious, it was much stronger than Hamas's military machine. Iran spent billions building up Hezbollah over the years, and it was a formidable threat for Israel. But we have decimated that formidable threat. Hezbollah is weaker. And what is the advantage? The advantage is that Hezbollah dominated Lebanon. The Hezbollah military machine was stronger than the Lebanese state. Hezbollah could easily defeat at any moment the Lebanese government, the Lebanese army, the Lebanese police. Hezbollah, though it was theoretically a terrorist organization on Lebanese soil, was in fact dominating, occupying Lebanon. You could even make a case that through Hezbollah, Iran was occupying Lebanon. Now, because of the Israeli strikes against Hezbollah, that Hezbollah's military machine has been, it's not destroyed totally, but it has been very much weakened. So relatively speaking, the government of Lebanon is much stronger than ever before. And I think this creates opportunities, which I spoke about a moment ago, for a breakthrough on the Israeli-Lebanese track. We want it. The government of Lebanon want it. And most importantly, the people of Lebanon want to live in peace and cooperation with Israel. And we watch Lebanon very closely. It's our northern neighbor. It's not just the Christian community in Lebanon which wants peace with Israel. It's not just the Sunni Muslim population of Lebanon which wants peace and quiet with Israel. It's not just the Druze community of Lebanon that wants peace with Israel. Even inside the Shia Muslim community, which was Hezbollah's homeland in many ways, their basis for support, we are seeing cracks where people are saying, Hezbollah, you must disarm. You must stop being this proxy of Iran. It's time for a better future for Shia Muslims in Lebanon and for all Lebanese. And I think with this new political reality, we can be hopeful about the future of Lebanon and the future for peace between Israel and Lebanon. I'd remind you that for many years, Beirut was considered the Paris of the Middle East. And yet Lebanon has become a failed state. A failed state. Their economy is in tatters. Their political structure was challenged by this Iranian presence in their country. Their government had sovereignty in name only, while they couldn't do anything to rein in Hezbollah. Today, there is a chance for the Lebanese people to re-establish their independence and their sovereignty as a free country in the Middle East. They can rebuild their economy. They can rebuild their political structure. There is no reason why Lebanon should not once again be a successful country.
Lastly, what have been the biggest gains for Israel in this war on Iran?
So the most important thing is that the Iranian nuclear program has been set back in a very serious way. We in Israel were very concerned about the Iranian nuclear program. Now, of course, the Iranians will tell everybody that their nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. But everyone knows that to be just propaganda, that to be a lie. It's clear that the Iranians wanted a nuclear weapon. And they can say, their diplomats can say, of course, it's only for peaceful purposes, but everyone understood what the Iranians were doing. They don't need nuclear energy, a country with so many fossil fuels. Why did they suffer all the international sanctions? Why did they go into that fight with the international community, with the UN Security Council, with the IAEA, if it was all for peaceful purposes? And the most telling thing is there are many countries which have nuclear programs for energy, but they don't have enrichment. They don't enrich their own uranium. You don't need to enrich your own uranium for a peaceful nuclear program. But the Iranians demanded, they called it the right to enrich. But you only need to enrich if you want a bomb. If you want a peaceful program, you don't need to enrich. And so I would argue this was the main threat. And though this threat has not been eliminated, it has dissipated because of our actions and the actions of the United States. And what we have to do now is ensure that the Iranian program is continued to be dismantled. That can be done, as I said before, diplomatically through an agreement, or if unfortunately we have no choice, we will act. The Americans say they will act. One way or the other, this terrible regime in Iran will not get a nuclear weapon.
I forgot. How do you see the genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice playing out?
I don't know how it will play out. I don't know what the justices there will decide. I can only speculate. I do know this, that the charge of genocide is both offensive and based on fabrications. I've seen UN statistics on the population of Gaza. I've seen other statistics. And the population of Gaza is no smaller than it was on October 7th, 2023. And how can you say genocide? Of course, people have been killed. Many Hamas terrorists have been killed, and unfortunately, some civilians were caught up in the crossfire. But that's armed conflict. And we were fighting to defend ourselves after we were attacked. The idea that Israel had a policy of genocide, let's be frank, Israel has the capability to destroy Gaza. No, but we were fighting a war against terrorists, not against the people of Gaza. And why did I say it's so offensive? Because if anyone on this planet has undergone genocide, it is my people. It is the Jewish people. I spoke earlier in our podcast about my father and how his family miraculously survived the Holocaust. But it's the Jews who've gone through a genocide. But to say Palestinians, it frankly is, I think, an anti-Semitic fabrication, like other anti-Semitic fabrications. We are fighting a war that was forced upon us by Hamas. We are defeating Hamas. In the framework of that war, innocent civilians have unfortunately been caught up in the crossfire. But the charge of genocide is simply not true. And I think one of the reasons, objectively, for the deterioration in the bilateral relationship between South Africa and Israel is, of course, that South Africa stood behind these charges, and it's very disappointing. I remember when he was elected president, Nelson Mandela came to Israel. He met with the Israeli leadership. He visited Yad Vashem, the memorial to the Holocaust. And I'm speaking from memory, but he said Israel has a right to live behind secure and recognized borders. Hamas doesn't say Israel has a right to exist in any borders. Hezbollah says all of Israel must be destroyed. Iran says the Jewish state is illegitimate. These are not people I think that South Africa should be supporting.
Thank you. That was Mark Regev speaking to me, Steyn, on the NdB Sunday Show.
Healthcare matters, but what matters most?
Having cover for the people who keep this business going.
Unitas is there for you when it counts. Unitas Medical Aid for South Africa. Visit unitas.co.za and find your plan.
In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The BizNews Conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9, Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began, and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description. Start your day a step ahead. BizNews Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox, sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now.